What up, y'all? Back with another video. Today I'm talking about Jake Paul's Most Valuable Promotions is putting on an MMA event and go in a little bit of detail about what this means for the UFC. And I see a lot of things out there that say, hey, is this going to be a direct competitor to the UFC? Should Dana White be worried? If Jake Paul's entering in the MMA business, is he going to take the entire business over, the business structure, the business model, steal fans? A lot of funny stuff, man. It's just interesting because, a lot of people don't realize because of this social media era that we're in and this clickbaity era, how much viewership the UFC gets and how much money the UFC makes and how many athletes are under the UFC roster, under the UFC banner, and under the UFC contract. So if you are performing, in the UFC, if you're under contract in the UFC, you cannot compete in MMA outside of the UFC, right? And Dana White is very, very smart about how he orchestrated those contracts, basically a non-compete clause that you can't fight outside the UFC. Because if you could, I would say that Dana White and the UFC's business model would have a direct competitor in Jake Paul's Most Valuable Promotions. What you have to understand about Jake Paul's Most Valuable Promotions is what he is doing is he is putting on fights for people that have name value, strictly name value, and that are past the prime of their career, essentially, right? Or they didn't pan out in the UFC, they're past their prime. So you have Nate Diaz, who's past his prime, still fan favorite, not under contract with the UFC. Mike Perry was an average to good fighter in the UFC outside of his contract at the UFC. Transferred over to BKFC, did really well. Now he's fighting for Jake Paul's Most Valuable Promotions. That sort of business model, you can only do that for so long. There's only so many guys, top level guys that you could get in there who are going to fight MMA, who are going to actually get people to show up and pay their money. What people don't realize is that the main event is Ronda Rousey versus Gina Carano. People see that and say, okay, this is better than the White House card, which I would agree. Ronda Rousey coming back is a big freaking deal. I do think currently what they have right now with the MVP card, MMA card, is it better than the White House card? I think there's an argument to be made there, but the issue is how long is Ronda Rousey going to be around to do high level fights? If they didn't have Ronda Rousey, who else is Jake Paul picking that can headline a humongous MMA fight? Francis Ngannou? Okay, Francis Ngannou's a big name, but Francis Ngannou can't go fight Tom Aspinall under UFC contract. He can't go fight John Jones under UFC contract. He can't go fight Curtis Blades under UFC contract. What kind of fight can Francis Ngannou fight? He has to go fight a Tyson Fury, maybe somebody in a boxer who wants to transfer over to MMA, or some sort of gimmick fight, and that is not a sustainable business model. Jake Paul is not going to take a 8-0 pro MMA fighter who is 8-0 undefeated, who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and put him on an MVP event. That's not going to make him money. That's not going to, it's not lucrative in any way, shape, or form. A lot of the stars in the UFC became stars in the UFC. They didn't get there and already be a star. When's the last person who's come to the UFC who was already a star? Maybe Michael Chandler or maybe Pereira, but Pereira had a lot of name value because of all his time, but Pereira had to go out there and work his way up to becoming Alex Pereira in the UFC, right? He did it rather quickly, but there is a progression, right? Jake Paul's MVP is, I have to find people who have name value right now, who are not a part of the UFC, or not under contract anywhere, who are probably on the tail end of the career because he's not getting prime time fighters fighting for MVP. Gina Carano, Ronda Rousey past their prime. Nate Diaz past his prime. Mike Perry past his prime. And I got to get these people with name value so I can sell. There's only so many people with name value that are going to be willing to step in the MMA ring, the octagon. And that's a whole different ballgame now. You know what I'm saying? You ain't getting Floyd Mayweather to do it. You ain't getting Gervonta Davis to do it. You ain't getting a lot of these big boxer named guys to do it. Of course, they were looking at potentially getting Masvidal to sign up. Yeah, okay, Masvidal has name value, but Masvidal's career is at the tail end of its career. There's almost only so many of these gimmick fights that you can put on. The UFC is a global brand where they are putting on fights almost every single weekend. They have rankings. They have fighters from all over the world. They have belts. They have divisions, and it's a full-blown business. So most Vibe Promotions doing MMA is, it's exciting to see. I like seeing some of these fights that they're making, but they are not going to be a competitor with the UFC, guys. They are not going to be a competitor with the UFC. I know they're working things out with Netflix and all that, but they will not be putting on events every other week with big name stars. They will not be putting on events every month with big name stars. So let's be real here. Jake Paul is a phenomenal marketer, phenomenal salesperson. He has a lot of talent. He's generated a lot of attention for himself, but he is not going to be someone that's going to create a whole business model that's going to compete with the UFC that has 30 years of name value, 30 years of fans and trustworthiness in fights, and real competitors, real fighters who want to have a career in fighting, who want to be the best of the best. The only spot for them in MMA is the UFC. It's not Bellator that went washed. It's not the PFL. It's not none of that stuff, guys. It is the UFC. And Dana White will tell you that. Dana White knows that for a fact. Dana White knows how hard this business model is to be good at, which is why he laughs at his competitors, right? He literally laughs at his competitors. Like, oh, these guys think that they're going to figure it out. Okay, we'll see. Like, he literally laughs because he knows how difficult it is. And, people make fun of the fighter pay all they want. I agree that fighters should get paid more. Of course, I think everyone in their jobs want to get paid more, obviously, right? But when you look at the business model and you look at, okay, what fighters are complaining, very seldomly is it someone worth watching that is complaining. Very seldomly is it a champion or a high-level guy who's complaining about fighter pay. It's always the middle of the pack guys, or the low tier guys, or the guys who were been in the UFC but they never really made a splash. So we have to be realistic here about what is someone's worth and can you sell pay-per-views, because the last person to really sell pay-per-views and really knock it out the ballpark from a pay-per-view model is Conor McGregor. I mean, even John Jones, even Israel Adesanya, they sell pay-per-views, but at the level Conor did, you're talking about a cash cow. You got to look back at all those Triller events that Jake Paul did and all that stuff. How many pay-per-views did Nikisa and them say that they really sold? Pay-per-view is not easy to sell, guys. It's a different business model, and Jake Paul's MVP will not be competing with the UFC, although they will put on entertaining fights, and when they do put them on, I will watch 100%, because I'm a fight fan and I enjoy seeing that stuff, but it's not going to compete with the UFC, guys. It's two different business models, and the UFC will continue to be here. I don't know if MVP putting on MMA fights will be around a year from now or 5 years. Okay. Alrighty, guys. Take care. Be back in tomorrow, another video.